The most underrated player from every NHL team this season. I feel like it's been almost over 2 years now since I gave my picks as to which players in the league I think are underrated currently, and this is something that's always changing. For an example, Alexander Barkov is a guy that a lot of people used to say is underrated, but once everybody starts calling one player underrated, that player really isn't underrated anymore, if you get what I'm saying. And also, just as a heads up, these players in this video I feel like are underrated league-wide, not necessarily underrated by the fan base of the team that they're on. So just keep that in mind, and with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go division by division, so just to change things up from the last one from every team video, we'll start in the Pacific with the 1 seed Vegas Golden Knights, and my pick for them is centerman Chandler Stevenson. I feel like he has been underrated ever since coming to Vegas, but especially this season where he has been a fantastic #1 center. He plays close to 20 minutes a night. Vegas uses him in pretty much every situation, both special teams, power play, and penalty kill. His 38 points on the season is already a career high, and early in the season he proved that his good results since coming to Vegas aren't just because he plays with Mark Stone and Max Pacioretty, because both of those guys missed a good chunk of time to start the season, and when they weren't in the lineup, Chandler Stevenson was still putting up fantastic numbers and playing incredibly well, so he's my pick for Vegas. The Calgary Flames, my pick for them is going to have to be Elias Lindholm, who this season I feel like has become especially underrated because of the amazing play of the likes of Matt Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau especially. Lindholm is the guy that just always seems to fly under the radar, but is super consistent, always puts up great results at both ends of the ice, and I know plus minus is a stat that people don't really put a whole lot of stock in, myself included, but Elias Lindholm is a plus 33 right now. When it's that high, I feel like you have to at least recognize it. The Los Angeles Kings, my pick for them is defenseman Mikey Anderson, who has really carved himself out a pretty fantastic role with the Kings, and that role is being Drew Doughty's shutdown D partner. Those two as a pairing have played more minutes this season together than any other Kings defense pairing by almost 100 minutes, and when those two are on the ice together, they have an expected goals for percentage of over 58%. I really think Mikey Anderson deserves a lot of credit for the season that Drew Doughty is having. He really enables Doughty to do what he does best, and that is jump up in the rush, get involved offensively, and he's really been able to do that this season at a high level because he's playing with such a good defensive defenseman in Mikey Anderson, so he's going to be my pick for the Kings. I think he's really their unsung hero on the blue line. Moving on to the Anaheim Ducks, my pick for them is going to be Sonny Milano, who finally seems to be having that breakout season where for a while it looked like maybe his time in the NHL was dwindling down and that this chance with the Anaheim Ducks was going to be his last chance to make it, and I think he's proven that he's definitely an NHL caliber player and a productive one. He's 5th on the Ducks in scoring with 25 points in 36 games. That's more points than the likes of Rickard Rakell, Adam Henrique, Jakob Silfverberg as well. Sonny Milano has been very good for the Ducks this season, and I think a little bit underrated. The Edmonton Oilers, my pick is definitely going to be Jesse Puljujarvi. I always called him Jesse Puljujarvi, but I guess I've been doing it wrong and it's Jesse. I'm a big fan of Puljujarvi's game. He's scoring at above a half point per game pace this season, and for as much talk as there is about the Edmonton Oilers forwards not buying in defensively, Puljujarvi's defensive impacts on the season have actually been elite. He's a very good top 6 two-way forward, and I feel like he would get a lot more love if maybe he was a little bit more flashy or put up a bit more points in the power play. Next up, we have the San Jose Sharks. My pick is going to be Alexander Barabanov, who they acquired from the Maple Leafs at last year's trade deadline, and on the Sharks, Barabanov has quietly turned into a pretty productive offensive player. The only forwards on the Sharks this season with more points than Barabanov are Timo Meier, Thomas Hertl, and Logan Couture, and on the season, Barabanov also has a higher points per game than guys like Elias Pettersson, Travis Konechny, and Tim Stutzla. Moving on to the Vancouver Canucks, my pick for their most underrated player is actually Nils Höglander, whose counting stats are probably not where you'd want them to be if you're a Canucks fan. He has just 8 goals and 16 points on the season, but what I love about Höglander's game is basically everything else. How he plays, he's relentless on the forecheck, he's a pest to play against. I feel like he has the potential to be like a Brad Marchand light. Ever since coming into the league, he's had really solid underlying numbers as well. I feel like once Höglander starts to produce a little bit more, starts to get more ice time, that he's really going to be a problem and be one of the Canucks' better forwards. The final team of the Pacific Division, the Seattle Kraken, I'm going with Jared McCann. Now this is one of those where I feel like it's more so he's underrated league-wide, definitely not underrated within the Seattle Kraken fan base. I mean, he's literally their leading scorer right now, but in my eyes, Jared McCann is really one of the more underrated goal scorers in the league. He has a fantastic shot, a really quick release, he's elite on the power play as well, and his 19 goals on the season is already a career high. I really feel like Jared McCann is going to be a focal point of the Seattle Kraken franchise for a long time and be a player who we see score score 25 to 30 goals pretty much every season. Moving on over to the Eastern Conference now, starting in the Metro with the 1 seed Carolina Hurricanes. My pick for their most underrated player is going to be defenseman Ethan Bear, who they acquired from the Oilers in the offseason, 1-for-1 for Warren Foegele. And at this point, I feel like that's a trade that the Carolina Hurricanes have won so far. Foegele really hasn't produced, I'm sure, as much as the Oilers would have liked, and Ethan Bear has quietly just been an extremely steady, reliable defensive defenseman in Carolina. And to be honest, I've always liked Ethan Bear. I know he got a lot of criticism in Edmonton, especially in last year's playoffs, because I mean, he had one really bad turnover that cost them a game, and then he really never saw the ice again. I really feel like the Oilers should have been a little bit more patient with Ethan Bear, but I'm sure the Carolina Hurricanes are pretty happy with how this deal has worked out so far for them. The Pittsburgh Penguins, I'm going with another defenseman here, John Marino, who I really feel like has been underrated ever since he came into the league. He was overlooked in his rookie season because in that season there was also rookie defensemen named Cale Makar and Adam Fox, and also Quinn Hughes, and on his own team he's playing behind Chris Letang, who is one of the more popular defenders of the past decade. John Marino is quietly an extremely effective two-way defenseman for the Pittsburgh Penguins, who's capable of eating a lot of minutes and is a guy that I think is going to be a staple on their blue line for a very long time. Next up we have the New York Rangers. I'm going with Chris Kreider. With the season he's having, he's definitely getting a lot more recognition for how good he is than he has in years past, but I still feel like he's not getting talked about a lot for a guy who's literally tied for the league leading goals right now with 33. His confidence just seems to be on a whole other level right now. He's tried the Michigan this season, actually almost pulled it off in the breakaway challenge at the skills competition, or actually it was the save streak challenge, I think. He actually pulled off the Kucherov deke successfully against Andrei Vasilevsky. He just seems to be playing with a lot of swagger, and it's honestly been really fun to watch. The Washington Capitals, I'm going to go with centerman Lars Eller, who I feel like is quietly a really important player for the Washington Capitals. He's scoring at above a half point per game pace this season, and for the first couple of months while Nick Backstrom was out, Eller actually did a very good job of filling in as the number 2 center. Even going back to the Capitals Stanley Cup run in 2018, Lars Eller was one of their more important players on that playoff run. He's kind of been underrated for a while, I feel like. The Columbus Blue Jackets, I'm going to go with Oliver Bjorkstrand, and again, similar to the Jared McCann pick, this isn't a guy who I'm sure is underrated within the Columbus Blue Jackets fan base. I'm sure every Blue Jackets fan knows how important Bjorkstrand is to that team. Really, over the past 4 seasons, he's consistently scored at above or close to a 20-goal pace. For the majority of his career, he's had really solid two-way impacts as well. The New York Islanders, I'm going to go with Oliver Wahlstrom, one of their first-round picks from the 2018 NHL draft. He's really turned himself into a pretty effective middle six forward who I feel like would be producing a lot more if he wasn't playing for the New York Islanders. But even playing in a system like Barry Trotz, which is very defense-oriented, he still has 10 goals in just 38 games across a 82-game season. That's above a 20-goal pace, and that's with only averaging a little over 13 minutes a night in terms of ice time. I feel like Wahlstrom has the potential to be a 30-plus goal scorer, and I think we're going to see that come out over the next couple of seasons. The more the Islanders coaching staff tries to trust him and play him more minutes. The New Jersey Devils, this was an easy pick for me. I'm definitely going with Jesper Bratt, who's up to 43 points in 45 games on the season. If you ask me, he probably should have been the New Jersey Devils all-star representative ahead of Jack Hughes, just because Jack Hughes missed a good chunk of time. Jesper Bratt is a fantastic top 6 forward, and I rarely ever hear his name brought up, even when people are talking about the New Jersey Devils, it seems like. But this season, he's far and away been their best forward, again, considering the fact that Jack Hughes missed a good amount of time. If Jesper Bratt's career continues on this track, there's a chance that he could be recognized as one of the bigger draft steals in recent memory. He was a 6th round pick by the Devils just back in 2016. And now for the final team of the Metro Division, the Philadelphia Flyers, I'm going to go with Scott Lawton here. I feel like if he were, say, a pending UFA at the end of the season, or even if he just wasn't signed through 2026, I feel like he'd probably be a pretty hot commodity leading up to the trade deadline. Scott Lawton's just a really fantastic role player who I think would fit a contending team perfectly as a 4th line center. He's great on the forecheck, he can kill penalties, very responsible defensively as well, and has the capability of chipping in some offense here and there as well. Moving back to the Western Conference now, in the Central Division, we have the Colorado Avalanche. This was an easy one for me. I'm definitely going with defenseman Devon Toews, a defenseman who's always been underrated, even going back to his time with the New York Islanders, but he's really just exploded ever since being dealt to the Colorado Avalanche, and especially this season, he has easily been one of the best defensemen in the entire league. He's a point per game this season with 34 points in 34 games, and he averages over 25 and a half minutes a night. League-wide, definitely does not get near enough praise for just how good he is, and I feel like probably a big reason for that is because he's overshadowed by Cale Makar. The Nashville Predators, I'm definitely going with rookie forward Tanner Jeannot, who isn't really getting a lot of talk when it comes to the Calder Trophy, especially now with the likes of Anton Lundell heating up and thrusting himself into the conversation, and guys like Zegras and Raymond and Seider still being there, of course. But as of today, Tanner Jeannot is still the rookie goals leader with 14. He also brings an element to the game that not a lot of other rookies bring. He's incredibly physical and just physically imposing to play against. His forechecking is relentless. He finishes every check, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe he leads the NHL this season in terms of fighting majors. I feel like he deserves to be talked about a lot more when you're talking about the best rookies in the league this year. The Minnesota Wild, this is another one where I didn't have to think too long and hard about it. I'm definitely going with Marcus Foligno. He's always been an incredibly hard worker, a great forechecker, and responsible defensively, but for the most part of his career, he's just been, a bottom six forward with not a whole lot of offensive upside. But you look at this season, he's got 17 goals in 40 games. That's already a career high for Marcus Foligno by a pretty wide margin. That's above a 30-goal pace, which is pretty insane to think about. So you factor in everything he does aside from the offense, and now he's scoring like this. He's a very important player for the Wild. The St. Louis Blues, I'm definitely going to go with Pavel Buchnevich, who they acquired from the New York Rangers in the offseason. And looking back at that trade now, definitely one of the bigger steals of the offseason. Buchnevich is up to 37 points in 39 games, third on the team in scoring behind Kyrou and Tarasenko. Fantastic play driver offensively, plays a very responsible two-way game as well, and he's only 26. This is going to be an important player for the St. Louis Blues for a long time, and to think they only gave up Sammy Blaine, a second-round pick for him. Next up, we have the Dallas Stars. I'm definitely going with Jason Robertson. This is a player that I have praised all season long. I'm going to continue to do so here because I still do not feel like league-wide he gets the recognition he deserves for just how good he is. In my eyes, Jason Robertson at this moment is one of the very best wingers in the entire National Hockey League. There's only 14 total players this season with a higher points per game than Jason Robertson. Still only 22 years old, definitely one of the better young players in the game today. The Winnipeg Jets, I'm going to go with defenseman Dylan DeMello, who is one of the better shutdown defenders in the NHL when you look at his underlying numbers. I feel like the Winnipeg Jets should probably play him a little bit more than like 16 and a half minutes a night, considering they're a team that kind of struggles defensively. Not a guy that gets a whole lot of recognition because there's not much to his game offensively whatsoever, but obviously defense is a huge part of the game as well, so I figured I would show Dylan DeMello some love and pick him as the Jets' most underrated player. The Chicago Blackhawks, I'm going with Brandon Hagel. This is a guy who's definitely not underrated within the Blackhawks fan base. I feel like whenever I talk about Chicago, there's always comments on my videos praising Brandon Hagel from the point of view of Hawks fans. League-wide though, I feel like there's a lot of people that probably don't realize how good he is and how important he is for the Blackhawks. He's actually fourth on the team in scoring with 26 points in 41 games. That's more points than the likes of Kubalik, Doc, Taze. He's a guy whose playstyle kind of reminds me of Zach Hyman, incredibly hardworking, always goes to the dirty areas, and is really good at complementing star players like Alex DeBrincat and like Patrick Kane. And now for the final team of the Central Division, the Arizona Coyotes, my pick for their most underrated player is Lawson Krause, who's up to 12 goals on the season, scoring at close to a 20-goal pace, has a real physical aspect to his game as well, solid defensive numbers, just a really solid, complete player, and he's still relatively young as well, going to be an RFA at the end of the season. I'm pretty intrigued to see what the Arizona Coyotes decide to do with Lawson Krause, if they're going to hold on to him and have him as a part of the team moving forward, or if maybe he's a player they're going to look to move out at the deadline. Moving on now to the final division of the video, the Atlantic. Starting out with the Florida Panthers, my pick is definitely Mason Marchment, who has 23 points in 22 games, definitely the quietest over a point per game player I feel like in the NHL this season. And the craziest part about those numbers in my opinion is the fact that he only averages about 13 minutes a night in terms of ice time, and he gets 0 power play time. Every one of his points on the season have been at even strength, and he is actually leading the entire NHL this season in terms of even strength points per 60 minutes at 4.916. It's not even close. Second place is Kadri at 4.044. The Tampa Bay Lightning, I'm going to go with Andre Palat, who's been a real solid two-way top six forward basically for his entire career. His defensive numbers aren't quite as fantastic as they were early on in his career when he was getting Selke Trophy votes, but still incredibly impactful, and he's producing very well offensively this season. 32 points in 43 games, 15 goals. He's on pace to get close, maybe even break his career high in goals, which is 23. The Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm definitely going to go with Alex Kerfoot on this one. I feel like he's a player who always gets overlooked on that team. He's got 31 points in 44 games. I would say he's definitely their best forward aside from the big four of Nylander, Marner, Matthews, and Tavares. To me, he was especially impressive in the playoffs last year against Montreal. I feel like he was one of the few Maple Leafs players that was actually really consistently showing up game after game in that series. He's really important for them, does a lot of different things very well, so he's my pick for their most underrated player. The Boston Bruins, I'm going to go with defenseman Matt Grzelcyk, who's on pace to put up a career high in points. He's currently at 16 in 41 games. Just a real solid top 4 two-way defenseman. His even strength possession metrics are fantastic, a Corsi for percentage of 58. For me, this one was between him and Mike Riley, who I feel like are both fantastic underrated defensemen. The Detroit Red Wings, going with another defenseman here, I'm going to say their most underrated player this season has been Gustav Lindstrom, who hasn't played top 4 minutes basically at all this season. He's pretty much been stapled to that bottom pair when he's in the lineup, which makes sense. He's still young and learning the ropes. It makes sense to shelter his minutes. But for the brief period of time where he was out of the lineup with an injury for the Red Wings this season, it was noticeable. Detroit's blue line is much better with him in it. He makes smart decisions. He's not flashy. He still doesn't have a goal in his professional career yet. I really like his game though. Never tries to do too much. It just always seems like he's doing the right thing when he's on the ice, so I'm going with him for the Red Wings. The Ottawa Senators, for their most underrated player, I'm going to go with Alex Formenton, who's got 10 goals, 11 assists for 21 points in 40 games, so right around a 20-goal, 42-point pace for Formenton, and he's doing that while basically getting fourth-line minutes. He doesn't play a whole lot. In terms of even strength points per 60 on the Ottawa Senators, he is 4th. Not really a guy that gets mentioned a whole lot when you talk about the core guys for the Ottawa Senators' future, you know, Shabbat, Kachuk, Stützle, Norris, and those players, but I really think he's going to be an Ottawa Senator and a good one for a long time. The Buffalo Sabres, I'm going to go with their newest player, Alex Tuch. I feel like people kind of forget just how good Alex Tuch is because he missed so much time to start this season with injury, and even in Vegas, like, he never really consistently got a top 6 role. That's a team that's obviously pretty loaded on the wing, and for the most part, when Alex Tuch was in the lineup, he was playing on the third line and still producing really well, but now that he's in Buffalo and he's kind of their guy offensively, he's a focal point of their offense, he's looked fantastic ever since the Eichel trade. I really feel like we're going to see Alex Tuch have some pretty huge seasons as a member of the Buffalo Sabres. And now for the final team of the video, the Montreal Canadiens. For their most underrated player, I'm going to go with Arturi Lehkonen. He's 4th on the team in scoring this season, only behind Drouin, Toffoli, and Suzuki. Whenever he's been in the lineup for the majority of his career, he's always played a responsible 200-foot game. Just a really solid bottom 6 two-way forward who I feel like would benefit a lot of contending teams. I kind of wonder what's going to happen with him leading up to the deadline. His contract is up, but at the end of the season, he's not going to be a UFA, he's going to be an RFA, so I'm interested to see if Montreal is going to keep him around or maybe if they're going to look to sell him off for some assets. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those were my picks for the most underrated player from every NHL team this season. I'm interested to hear what your guys' list would look like, so feel free to leave it down below in the comment section. And while you're down there, if you could, please drop a like on the video. I'd really appreciate it. Let me know that you enjoyed, and if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.